Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the latest FN Five-seveN. This is the MRD. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. And this you may see referred to as a Mark III as well, but kind of like Glock was for a while, they're not really marketing that Mark designation as much. Glock didn't start putting gens on their guns until they got to the Gen 4s. And if you look at their site for this, the MRD is what they make a big deal out of, which is modular red dot, or micro red dot actually. Be red dot ready. So you take this plate off, and unlike some guns that are coming out these days, they actually come with the plates and the screws right in the box, so it's ready to go, and the tool to do it. So if you happen to want to put one of the more common or popular red dots on here, chances are pretty good one of these plates will work with it, and it's there right out of the box. This gun here, I didn't put any optic on it. This is just the way it came out of the box. I always shoot them first with just the sights that come with them, and then decide if I'm going to go do any type of optics from there. The 5.7 shoots a very interesting round. It's a little mini rifle round. It's 5.7 by 28. And it's the same one that's in the PS90, or if you've got the version with the fun switch, the P90, which is the kind of that bullpup rifle. So the concept behind it is you can carry a lot of ammo. So it's a 20 round magazine. It's relatively thin, it's relatively light, and the ammo itself is very light, but it's quite effective. So the concept being, you've got, not only can you use the same ammo between your handgun and your rifle if you have both, but you also can carry a lot of it in the same weight and form factor. The round's a little bit longer because it's a rifle size round, but it's actually fairly small in diameter. It's not a lot bigger in diameter than a 22, but there's a lot more power here than a 22. One thing while I've got this magazine out, if you look at the magazine on the base plate, there's kind of a sharp ramp here. So it comes flat for a while and then sharply ramps up. And that matches with this sharp ramp on the bottom of the grip. So when you put the magazine in, if you put it in properly, it fits nice and flush. And there's really not even enough gap to grab a finger, but you do get a full 3-finger grip. This, even if there was enough gap to grab a finger, there's virtually no recoil on these. That's one of the nice things about that round. You've got a very, very effective round. The velocity is really high on it, but it doesn't really have much recoil. But I mentioned on the first look that the older magazines don't fit, and somebody commented that they do. So first off, I'll show you that the ones that I have don't. They will not go in, they will not lock. And without getting extremely brutal with it, I doubt there's any way I could make this work. However, that doesn't mean that FN hasn't changed the magazines in later generations. I've had the original Mark II that I showed in that first look for many, many years. So it's very possible that newer magazines before this came out had slight redesign to them, and they may work. But my experience has been all of the magazines that I have that both came with that Mark II when I bought it many years ago, and ones that I bought subsequent to that do not work with this. So it may depend on the exact magazines you've got. I do know that these magazines that come with it do work, and I also know that these magazines that come with it will work in the older generations. So if you're buying new magazines, you can buy the Mark III magazines and they are backward compatible. But that is just something to think about, especially if you've already got a 5.7 and you're looking to upgrade. Really, most of what you see here is a cosmetic difference, but that optics ready may be the key thing, because underneath this you've got a steel frame inside this slide wrapped in the polymer. So it's rather difficult to cut these for an optic. Yeah, I'm sure it can be done, but it's not easy to do. So if you're looking for an optic, the optic ready one right from the factory has a flat up here under this plate that will allow a solid, easy to mount level optics mount. So that's one of the big things you get with this. The ergonomics are kind of nice. It has light finger grooves. So you'll see there's a bit of a contour to it. And if I put my finger on it, it kind of fits my hand fairly well. You'll see that the first finger kind of fits up under the trigger guard. There's kind of a nice undercut there, and kind of lines up with that first little bulge. But if for some reason my fingers were to be bigger or smaller and do that, it's not enough to bother me. It's not enough to hurt. It's not a sharp ridge like some finger grooves are that if you either line up on them nicely or you hate them. This one, I have a feeling regardless of the size of your hands, it's going to work well. And it does do a nice job of positioning it. You've kind of got these little pyramid-y shapes on the sides here, kind of slot-like grooves at the front, pyramid-y shapes, slot-like grooves. So you've got kind of a diversity of textures, and they're all kind of designed to make it fit in your hand well and stay there. And then a relatively light sandpaper type finish. And when I say light sandpaper, it's got the look and texture of sandpaper. It's a little bit grippy, but it's not abrasive at all. I'm doing this and it's not tearing me up at all. You've got it up here where your thumb goes, and you've got some serrations on the front of the trigger guard, as well as a very nice Picatinny rail. So any accessory that you're wanting to put on this rail, you're going to have no trouble. It has some front serrations, easy to use, nice rear serrations, and like a lot of others, FNs, it's got these little wings. Also similar to like the HKVP9 that have these wings. So if you've got lighter grip strength, you're still going to be able to kind of fall back to these little wings. But they don't stick out enough to make a difference as far as biting into you when you're holding the thing. From a controls perspective, it does have a manual safety. It's easy to get to with whichever finger you're using. So if you're right-handed, I'm going to use this one. If you're left-handed, you'll use that one, but you operate it with your trigger finger. The takedown lever is here, which I'll show you when we get a little further into the video. You pull these back. These are actually easy to take down and maintain. They're just different. And of course the slide stop slide release. The safety is ambi. The slide stop slide release is only on the one side, and there's no option to reverse it. And the sights. Let's talk about the sights. The sights are very bright, easy to see. At this point right now on camera, they look like white dots. They're actually photoluminescent, so if you'd hit them with bright light, they would kind of glow a bit greenish. Under the studio lights, they stand out quite a bit, and of course the studio lights are probably charging them up a little bit. Don't confuse those with night sights. Most photoluminescent only glow for a little while, so if for whatever reason, middle of the night, you pulled this out from a darkened room, the sights would be dark. But what I do find is the photoluminescence is it makes them really easy to see at the range. So photoluminescent to me is useful at the range, less useful if you actually need night sights. Of course, with the optic cut, you could put a red dot on there, and that kind of solves a lot of that. The sights are technically replaceable. There's a pin that would hold the rear sight in. The front sight looks to me like you'd actually have to take apart part of the slide to get to it. So to some extent, even though theoretically these sights are replaceable, I don't see where they're going to be easy to replace. And because they're not like any other gun out there, a manufacturer that would make sights for this would have to specifically make sights for this, which means there's probably not going to be a lot out there. So if you don't like the sights, you're really going to end up going red dot. The rear sight is adjustable, and one thing I do find with these, this round is a kind of a long distance round, and even in a pistol you can shoot this at a longer distance. So it came from the factory aimed for a longer distance, so I had to adjust it. But there's the windage adjustment screw here and the elevation screw there, and they were very easy to adjust. So I did have to adjust the sights. Now I'm not saying they weren't accurate from the factory. They were probably quite accurate at the 50-yard or whatever mark they were wanting, that they lined it up for. In an indoor range, I was shooting at really self-defense distances. So at those distances, I had to either adjust my point of aim or adjust the sights, and I chose to adjust the sights. So keep that in mind. You may have to adjust it, but it's not that they didn't do a good job at the factory. Most concealed carry and self-defense guns are aimed, the sights are pretty much designed to be on around 15 yards. These are much further out because the round's actually capable of that. Using this round at 15 yards is kind of underutilizing the capability of the round. From the safety perspective, I mentioned it has a thumb safety. It does not have an inertial toggle, but it also does have a magazine disconnect. I'm not particularly a fan of those, and it does have the internal drop safeties. So this is designed to be a drop-safe gun. So let's talk about a few stats. This is not a particularly small gun. It's 8.2 inches front to back. It's 5.6 inches tall, and it's 1.35 inches thick. So it's a little on the larger side, but it's fairly light, 25.2 ounces. And of course it does hold 20 rounds in the included magazines. There is a 10 round magazine version of this available. One thing I'll note with that, if you see the 10 round magazines, they're kind of weird. So they've kind of got a magazine body that ends here and then like a frame that comes down to the base plate. So if you get the 10 round version and you're in a state that doesn't have that limitation and you really wanted the 20 rounds, those 10 rounds are going to always be 10 rounds. So make sure you get the one that is for the region you're in that suits what it is that you actually want. Let's go ahead and demonstrate the trigger, and unfortunately I do have to use a magazine. So the gun's unloaded, empty magazine. It has a annoying magazine disconnect. So there's the take-up. It's actually relatively little take-up. It's fairly crisp, short break. It's about a 6-pound trigger, and can't top the magazine with the trigger pulled, so I cycle it. There's the reset, a little bit of take up to get back on the wall, and then the break, and I'll cycle it one more time to show you that the reset is basically all the way out of the normal travel. So it's not a short reset gun, but the overall trigger travel itself is reasonable enough that I would consider the reset in the overall trigger to be good. It's not a combat trigger in what is kind of designed to be a combat handgun. You know, these are designed for the military to be used as military sidearms to go along with the P90, which again is their bullpup rifle. So I'd mentioned disassembling this. These are fairly easy to take apart. I tend to put it on safety so that I don't accidentally trip the hammer, even though with the magazine disconnect it's a little difficult to do accidentally. But you pull it back a little bit and then pull back on this till it goes all the way back and then let forward, and the slide comes up and off. So I'll set that aside for the moment. Here's the frame. It is an internal hammer gun, so it's not a striker gun, but there's not a whole lot of complexity going on in here. Nice, solid, robust rails. There's the hammer. And as I come towards the front, you notice there are no rails. This hooks up differently. It's designed differently, and the barrel hook plays into it. The whole locking mechanism on this is a little different than, let's say, a Glock like you're used to. It's not a tilting barrel. The barrel hooks with this hook, and effectively this is a delayed blowback gun. So it is pretty much blowback, which is unusual in handguns that fire rifle-style rounds, but due to this round, the design of it, and the way the power is produced on this round, blowback works for it. To remove the barrel, you actually push the barrel forward and tilt it up, and the barrel comes out with the recoil spring assembly and the barrel actually acting as the guide rod, all as one unit. Unless you're having a problem with the spring, there's no reason to disassemble this further. So when I bring the barrel up, I might get the little light. It's a well-machined, really well-done barrel, conventional rifling. What you see in there is a little bit of dirt that I didn't get out. That's not chatter marks or tool marks. It's a little bit of residue that I didn't fully get out when I cleaned it. But it's a 22-ish diameter barrel because it's that 5.7, and the whole barrel, I'm sorry, the chamber side is the ramp because the rounds feed directly in. So when you put the magazine in, I'll show you that, when you put the magazine in, if there was a round in this, kind of turn it where you could see it, the round would be lined up directly with the barrel. The barrel would sit further down in there. I don't want to try to push it in there without the slide, but it pretty much feeds straight in. So from a feed ramp perspective, any part of the chamber is effectively the feed ramp. It's kind of a very interesting, unique design. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the slide. And the first thing you'll notice is there is quite a bit of metal in here. The slide is actually metal. The polymer is an outer jacket, which protects it from damage, but also makes it robust enough to hold on to without making it excessively heavy. You want to keep the slide lighter on this particular round so that it'll cycle effectively. And one of the things too is, being a blowback type system, they had to design all the weights and stuff correctly so that when you put a red dot on it, it doesn't disrupt it. You might have problems if you tried to do that in the original one. But everything in here is well machined, well constructed. It's overall a very, very well done gun, which I would expect no less from FN. And to put it back together again, relatively easy. Slide the barrel in till the front part goes in, and then just push it forward, and you kind of hurt it. At that point it kind of naturally dropped down, and you do have to just kind of make sure that it's kind of basically right up and down. And then to put it back together, you line it up and then just kind of push down and pull back. So I left the magazine in there, which didn't hurt it, but normally you would of course not have the empty magazine in there. I put it in there to demonstrate the rounds going straight in. But overall, despite being different, it's actually quite easy to maintain. It's very toolless and comes apart and goes back together quite easily. Overall, these are well-designed guns. The concept of these is well proven. The internal mechanics of this is really not any different than the prior generation, so I would expect this to have all the same quality and reliability features of the prior versions. So in summary, I really do like this gun. I like the 5.7 in general. I like the round. Question then would become, should you go get one of these? Well, if you're looking for a 5.7 and you don't have one, this would probably be where I would start. They're a little bit pricey. MSRP is $14.49. You can get this. I've got this one for a little less than $1,200, so they are out below MSRP. The prior version, I'm seeing under $1,000 now, so that might be one of the things that might tilt you towards the prior version, but that's not unusual. The new one comes out, the older one gets cheaper. But having the factory red dot capability right from the factory would say if you don't have one at all, you might lean towards this. So the next question is, well, I've already got a 5.7, the original version of the Mark II. Should I upgrade to this? My thought is not unless you need the optics. If you need the optics or that's something you want, then yeah, I would upgrade to it. But if you've got a prior version that's working well and optics isn't your thing that you're worried about, there's really nothing else on this other than ergonomics and styling to make it worth the upgrade. So if you already got one that works, keep it. If you're in the market for one, this might be a better choice to begin with. One other caveat is I would not expect Kydex holsters for the prior version to work from this. The slide's different enough, thick enough, that it may or may not have a problem. Some Kydex holsters may, but if you've got a really tight form-fitting Kydex holster, this may not fit in older design holsters. That'll get fixed fairly soon. Manufacturers will probably start cranking out holsters that work with both. You saw that with some of the Glocks when they first Gen 4 and Gen 5 first came out. Some of the holsters didn't work, and they very quickly adapted to that. So if you have one and you're swapping it out, your holster may or may not work. But of course, if you're buying this to begin with and buying new things for it, you're going to buy something that works with it to begin with. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell up there to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Getter, pretty much everywhere, or even on Rumble now. Thank you.